Alright, today we're going to go over our study guide. So on this test tomorrow, you are not going to have to draw a graph. It's going to give you graphs and it's going to give you tables and inputs, and you have to analyze them and make the patterns. So that's what we're focusing on when we do this study guide. What are the patterns? How can I look at tables and get information? So I should see a lot of writing on your test tomorrow, a lot of figuring out patterns. Now remember, patterns can be about multiplying and dividing, but they can also be about adding and subtracting. So let's look. I should see a lot of cubes and notes being taken. So Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Mann start an exercise plan to prepare for a 10K run. Now I don't know if I have to know the distance of this run. Here's their plan. Mrs. Jones ran for 1 kilometer on that first day. A kilometer is similar to a mile, but it's a little shorter. On the second day, she ran 1.5 kilometers. What does 1.5 look like? 1 5/10 or 1.5. When was this? The second day. The third day she ran 2 kilometers. That was on the third day. So I'm stopping after every sentence and making sure I understand. Next, on the fourth day, she ran 2.5. That would be 2 5/10, 2.5, or 2.5 kilometers. When was this? On the fourth day. This pattern continues as Mrs. Jones continues to prepare. Mrs. Mann ran 1 kilometer on that first day, 2 kilometers second day, 3 kilometers third day, and she ran 4 kilometers fourth day. This pattern continues. Her pattern is a little easier to understand. 1 kilometer first day, 2 the second, 3 the third, 4 the fourth. But I still did cubes. I still circled my numbers and looked at what they meant. So I am completing the table using graph paper, create ordered pairs. So I have to complete the table. That's my first job. Mrs. Jones is the first one. 1 kilometer on the first day. The second day was 1 5/10. The third day she ran 2 kilometers. Fourth day she ran 2.5. What is the pattern? 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. Go ahead and fill out the rest. Hopefully you saw that pattern. Look at what the pattern was. So what is the pattern? I'm adding a half or adding 5/10 every time. So I'm adding 5/10 every time. That was her pattern. Let's look at Mrs. Mann. Mrs. Mann was 1 kilometer, and 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers. This is probably a little easier for me to figure out the pattern. So whatever the day is, that's the kilometers. She was running an awful lot by the end here. I don't know if that's realistic, but anyway, that's what the problem says. Here's our table. So what is her pattern? What is she adding every time? Every time she adds 1 more kilometer. So on what day will Mrs. Jones reach her race goal? What was her race goal? To prepare for a 10K. Oh, look at that. Up here, I even underlined it to tell me her goal. So her goal, she reached it here. Mrs. Jones reached her goal here. Let's go back to the question. On what day will Mrs. Jones reach her race goal? Mrs. Jones will reach it on day 19. On what day will Mrs. Mann? Day 10. How do the rates of increase compare? Let's look at this. This might be one of those action words that we're not sure it means because it's a vocabulary. Rate means like how fast. Increase means to go up. How fast does it go up? I already wrote that. Her rate of increase is a half. her rate of increase is 1 whole. So Mrs. Jones is a half. Mrs. Mann is a whole. So Mrs. Mann's rate of increase is double Mrs. Jones. So if you did not have these as your pattern, please add that. Go back and rewind if you do not understand what that was. Listen again. So will the lines continue to get further apart? Well, I have to graph those in order to do that. So let's look at what goes first. What goes first is the day goes down at the bottom. Our first column always goes at the bottom. Our second column, what do these numbers represent? Kilometers run. So this one I'm just going to label 0. I'm labeling the lines. 6, 7. I have to go all the way up to 20. Going all the way up to 20. What am I going to label this? Well, I go all the way to 10.5 and 20. I'm still going to label by ones. So this should already be done on your paper. Alright, so now I have my two colors, right? Look at your paper. Do you have your two colors for your two different items? I should have Jones, and I should have Mann. Okay, so I'm going to look at my information. On the first day, Miss Jones was at 1. Second day, Jones was at 1.5. Third day, 2. Fourth day, add another half. So every time I'm adding a half onto Jones, Mrs. Jones, adding a half on. So I'm going to use my straight edge. I hope you used your straight edge. My line is starting here at 1 because I don't have any data for day 0. This Mann, hers goes up. She's on the whole numbers. The 5th day was 5. 6th day was 6. 7th day was 7. And so on. Once you figure out the pattern, we've been talking a lot about patterns. Check your line. Is this what your line does? So today, I'm going a lot faster in my video because you should already have done your study guide and you were just checking your answers. Now I can go back and ask my question. Answer my question. Will the lines continue to get further and further apart? Yes, I could prove that because I'm going to pick a day. Let's say on day 5, they were at 3 and 5. They were at 3 and 5 kilometers. And on day 20, they were at 10.5 and 20. On day 20, they were at 0.5 kilometers and 20 kilometers. The difference, good math word, got larger. So I'm analyzing that information. Move over to the next one. Use the chart below. Input the data for a hang glider traveling 5 meters per second. So they were traveling 5 meters per second. They were 2 seconds. Now it's at 10. 3, it's at 15. 4, it's at 20. 5, it's at 25. So what are my patterns that I can identify? Play the chart, record any patterns. So patterns go this way and patterns go this way. So this way, the hang gliders, resistance increases. Increases means goes up. Increases by 5 meters every second. So what do I notice here? What's going on from here to get to here? Every second, the resistance is 5 times as much as the second. So this is times 5, this is plus 5. So I look at patterns going down and I look at patterns going across. So I'm writing a rule between the relationship between seconds and wind resistance. To get the wind resistance, I'm going to take the number of seconds and I'm going to multiply that by 5. So the number of seconds every time, so I have 4, I get over to 20. So your graph should look like what? This always goes at the bottom, the x, this always goes at the y. So my x is seconds, and my y is meters per second, wind resistance. Okay, so I'm going to label. How did I know to label by ones? Because my chart only went up to 5. What should I label over here? I count by 5s. 10, 15, 20. Okay, so at 1, they were at 0, they were at 0. At 1, they were at 1. 2, they were at 10. 3, they were at 15. And so on. Okay, so I know at 5 seconds it was 25 per second. So we need to look at the rules, focus a lot on these rules. Remember, we have rules as they go up and we have rules as they do this one. So this I could also, you're going to see on your test tomorrow that we have something called input, output. So what do we do from here to get to here? That's what we need to focus on. So I should see a lot of writing and patterns when you're taking that test tomorrow and you've done cubes on your word problems. So when you have a word problem, you've really broken up the parts and understood exactly what it is asking you.